Max's eyes narrowed as Sophia walked into the room, the twins at her side. He had planned to humiliate her tonight, but the sight of her, standing tall with the children who were now the center of her life, hit him harder than anything he'd ever anticipated. The game had changed, and it was no longer in his favor. If you're ready for the full story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from. You'll want to be here tomorrow, because I'm dropping another story just as wild as this one, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Now, let's dive in. Sophia Walker stood in front of the mirror, running her fingers through her auburn hair. She was just getting ready for another high society event, a gala that had been marked as the event of the year in the city's corporate world. The dress she'd chosen, a deep, rich red silk, clung to her frame like a second skin, her silhouette striking as she adjusted the hem, her reflection looking back at her with a quiet determination. She wasn't the same woman she used to be, the old Sophia. The one who had walked out of Max Cross's life years ago would have hesitated in front of a mirror like this. She would have second-guessed every detail, worrying about how she looked, how she'd be perceived. But that woman was long gone. Now, Sophia Walker stood with her back straight, her chin high, the strength she'd built as a mother and a woman a part of her bones. Her twins, Maxwell and Marina, giggled from the other room. She could hear them arguing over a game they were playing, their voices filled with innocence, humor, and something far more precious, peace. As she took a deep breath, her eyes flickered toward the framed photo on her vanity. It was a picture of her family, not the family she'd lost, but the one she'd chosen and fought for. The invitation had come out of nowhere, a simple envelope with Max's signature embossed in gold. The message had been clear. We'd be honored to have you join us for the annual Cross Enterprises Gala. We look forward to seeing you again. There was nothing that said she had to go, nothing that said she should. But something inside her had stirred, an old part of her that wanted to prove to herself that she was no longer that vulnerable, broken woman who had watched the life she thought she wanted slip through her fingers. Her fingers grazed the photograph again, and a small smile curled on her lips. You'll be fine, she told herself. You've come too far to be intimidated now. Meanwhile, Maximus Cross stood at the head of the grand ballroom, his eyes scanning the room as waiters circulated with champagne flutes and guests chatted in clumps, laughing loudly in the artificially lit glow of the chandelier above. He was in his element, calm, collected, and surrounded by power. Max knew everyone in the room, and more importantly, they knew him. The billionaire CEO of Cross Enterprises, the man who had built a corporate empire from the ground up. At 42, Max was as striking as ever. His dark hair, though flecked with silver at the temples, still gave him the allure of youth. His sharp jawline and cold, calculating gaze exuded authority. His tailored suit fit like armor, his every movement deliberate. Max Cross never did anything without purpose. And tonight, he had one purpose: to make Sophia Walker squirm. It had been 5 years since they'd divorced, 5 years since he'd last seen her. Since then, he'd built his empire, and his life had been filled with conquest after conquest, both in the boardroom and in the bedroom. He never thought about Sophia anymore, or at least he tried not to. But she had been the one woman who had ever truly known him, and that knowledge had eaten away at him. He thought about the day she'd walked away from him, leaving their marriage in tatters. He'd expected her to come back, to beg him to fix what had been broken, but she didn't. Instead, she disappeared from his life with nothing more than a cold, indifferent look. It had infuriated him. Max hadn't invited her to the gala out of any real desire for reconciliation. No, this was about control. Sophia was a beautiful woman, a woman who, for a time, had been by his side, pretending to fit in with his world of luxury and excess. He hadn't thought much about her since, But when he saw her name pop up in the list of invitees, an idea sparked in his mind. He'd let her come. Let her watch him bask in the admiration of the world. Let her see the life she had left behind. He wanted her to feel small, to feel the weight of the life she could have had, the life she'd thrown away. It wasn't just about power. It was about proving that without him, she was nothing. He smirked to himself, adjusting his cufflinks as the first few guests filtered into the ballroom. Tonight would be another victory, another notch in his belt. And he couldn't wait to see her face when she walked in. The clock struck 9. The evening air was cool as Sophia, holding the twins' hands, stepped out of the sleek black SUV and into the courtyard of Cross Enterprises' grand gala venue. The building loomed above them, its glass facade reflecting the stars. The soft hum of conversations and music could already be heard from inside. As they approached the entrance, Sophia adjusted her clutch bag, her eyes flickering briefly toward Maxwell and Marina, who were both in the process of trying to get their outfits straight. Maxwell, at 8 years old, already carried himself like his father in some ways, confident, poised, and with the confidence to take on the world. Marina, a few minutes younger, was a ball of energy, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, even as she tugged at the hem of her little black dress, trying to keep up with her brother. Sophia smiled softly at them, taking a moment to savor the warmth of their love before she entered the lion's den. They didn't know the full extent of her past with Max, but they knew enough to understand that this night wasn't exactly a pleasant reunion. They'd asked plenty of questions earlier, and she'd promised them a good time at the event, but that didn't mean she didn't feel the weight of what she was walking into. Max had built his empire off of exploiting weaknesses, and it had always been his way to find the things that made others uncomfortable. She didn't expect any different tonight. She straightened her posture, letting the moment pass before taking the first step into the venue. A moment later, the doorman opened the grand glass doors, and they walked in together. The hush that fell over the room was immediate. Guests who had been laughing and enjoying themselves stopped mid-sentence, their eyes flicking toward the entrance as Sophia walked in with the twins at her side. Sophia caught sight of Max across the room, his back straight, as he stood beside a group of well-dressed executives. His eyes locked onto hers immediately. There was no flicker of surprise, but there was something else, a sharpness in his gaze that told her he had been expecting her. He'd planned this. Max's jaw clenched, his lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His gaze flickered toward the twins, and for the briefest of moments he faltered. It was just a flicker, but it was enough to make her feel the shift. Sophia didn't look away. She wasn't afraid. In fact, she felt something within her settle. This moment, the one she had anticipated for so long, was just another chapter in her story. She wasn't the woman who would cringe at his presence anymore. She had learned how to stand on her own. Max's eyes narrowed, his smile tightening, and he excused himself from his conversation. As Sophia made her way through the crowd, the twins at her side, she couldn't help but notice the way people eyed her, her dress, her presence. She felt the familiar sting of judgment. They were curious, maybe even disappointed. She had been married to a billionaire. She should have been a part of this world forever. But she wasn't. She was an outsider now. And that was exactly how she liked it. What do you think Sophia is feeling right now? Do you think she's ready to face Max again, or is she just putting on a brave face? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The murmur of the crowd faded into a distant hum as Max approached. Sophia stood beside the twins, her calm demeanor never faltering, but the weight of his approach was undeniable. Max was a force, a presence that commanded attention the moment he stepped into a room. Yet, as he closed the distance between them, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. His eyes, always calculating, scrutinized her. There was something unreadable in his gaze, but Sophia knew him well enough to see through the facade. He stopped a few feet away, his hand slipping casually into his pocket. His tall figure was a stark contrast to her own, but she held her ground. She wouldn't let him tower over her. Not again. The twins shifted beside her, visibly uncomfortable in the face of this charged reunion, but Sophia gave them a reassuring squeeze. "Well, well, if it isn't Sophia Walker," Max said, his voice dripping with false warmth. His eyes flickered briefly to the twins, his expression tight, before returning to her. "I have to admit, I didn't think you'd actually show up." Sophia didn't flinch. "You didn't think I'd show up?" she asked, her tone cool. "I'm surprised you invited me at all, Max." Max smirked, leaning slightly forward, his eyes glinting with the confidence that came from years of controlling every room he entered. "Of course I invited you. It wouldn't be the same without you here," he said, though his words lacked sincerity. "It's not every day I get to see my ex-wife strut in like she owns the place, with twins." His gaze lingered on the children. "I didn't know you had the ability to move on." Sophia felt the sting of his words, but she refused to let him see it. Instead, she stood tall, her chest rising with a deep breath. "You've moved on," she reminded herself. "You're not that woman anymore." "They're my children, Max," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "And I'm more than capable of moving on." Her eyes met his, sharp as knives. "I suggest you keep that in mind." Max's smirk faltered for the briefest moment. He didn't like being challenged, not by anyone, and certainly not by her. The silence stretched for a beat longer than was comfortable before he laughed, an almost bitter sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Of course," he said, stepping back and sweeping his arm toward the room. "I didn't mean to intrude on your new life. It's just that you were always so vulnerable when we were married. I suppose I just didn't expect to see you looking so put together." Sophia could hear the thinly veiled insult behind his words, but she refused to let it rattle her. She felt the cool breeze of the gala's air conditioning against her skin, a reminder that she was in control now. This wasn't a war she had to win by reacting. She had already won it simply by being here, by showing up, uninvited and unapologetic. "I've done a lot of things on my own since then," she said, her gaze unwavering. "But thank you for noticing." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Max opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a voice broke through the tension. "Mom!" Maxwell, her son, tugged at her hand, his wide eyes bright with excitement. "When do we get to eat the cake? Marina says it's the best." Sophia smiled, grateful for the interruption. She ruffled his hair affectionately, her focus momentarily shifting to her children. "Very soon, sweetie," she said, the warmth in her voice genuine. "Don't worry." Max's gaze softened for the briefest second as he looked at his children. His children, she reminded herself with a silent bitterness. But then the moment passed and his smirk returned. He had never been one to linger on emotions. As the twins chatted excitedly about the cake, Sophia turned to face Max again, her posture relaxed, her confidence now more visible than ever. "You didn't invite me here to catch up, Max," she said, her voice low. "What's this really about?" Max's eyes narrowed, his fingers flexing slightly in his pockets as if preparing for something he'd rehearsed. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I wanted to see if you were still the same woman who couldn't live without me, or if you had actually grown up." Sophia's lips parted as she absorbed his words, but she didn't flinch. Her chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I've grown up, Max," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean I've forgotten how to stand up for myself." Max's expression flickered with something akin to frustration, but he quickly masked it with his signature cold smile. "That's good to hear," he said, stepping back and giving a dismissive wave. I suppose you're here to show me how strong you've become. I'll admit, it's a little amusing seeing you like this. Sophia couldn't help herself. You never thought I was strong, she said quietly, locking eyes with him. You just wanted me to be your shadow. Max flinched, though only slightly. But it was enough to remind Sophia of something she'd nearly forgotten. He wasn't invincible. The tension between them hung thick in the air, the soft murmurs of the gala now feeling distant and faint. The twins, blissfully unaware of the charged exchange between their mother and father, tugged at her hand once again, eager to continue exploring the event. Sophia glanced down at them, then back up at Max. I'll be right back, she said, turning away from him and guiding the children toward the dessert table. She didn't need to say anything more. Max stood frozen for a moment, watching her retreat, his mind clearly working. He had invited her here with the intent to push her buttons, to assert his dominance. But Sophia hadn't played by his rules. She'd reminded him of the woman he had underestimated. For the first time in a long while, Max felt something unsettling settle in the pit of his stomach. Do you think Max was caught off guard by Sophia's confidence? What do you think he's feeling right now? Let us know your thoughts below. Max watched her walk away, her back straight, her posture almost regal. It wasn't the reaction he'd expected, not at all. He had imagined Sophia walking in, awkward and unsure, maybe even intimidated by the opulence of the gala. He had imagined her shrinking under the weight of his gaze, waiting for him to remind her who had the power. But instead, she walked in with her head held high, the twins at her side, looking perfectly at ease. What was she playing at? Max ran a hand through his hair, his sharp gaze never leaving Sophia as she made her way across the room, her children trailing behind her like a pair of innocents in a world they didn't understand. He hated that she'd caught him off guard. He hated that she wasn't the fragile woman he'd left behind. For a long moment he stood there, frozen in the middle of the ballroom, watching as she interacted with the guests around her. She was calm, collected, a stark contrast to the chaos he felt building inside himself. The idea of humbling her had always been a source of secret pleasure for Max. But now he felt something different, something he didn't want to admit. She was happy. Happy without him. Max couldn't let that thought settle. He refused to. Sophia, on the other hand, felt the sharp sting of Max's presence as she continued through the crowd. But she didn't let it show, not even for a moment. As she passed by guests, she heard their hushed whispers. Some of them had probably heard about her divorce from Max, but they didn't know the real story. They didn't know how cruel he had been behind closed doors. They didn't know how much he had tried to control her, to mold her into the woman he wanted her to be. She kept her composure, smiling and exchanging pleasantries with the people around her, but her mind kept drifting back to him, the man who had once been her world and who now seemed like a stranger. She had left him, rebuilt herself from the wreckage of their marriage, and was now standing in front of him as if she were a completely different person. But that didn't mean the hurt was gone. The scars were still there, faint, but lingering. The words he had said years ago still echoed in her ears. The words that had pushed her to the edge and forced her to leave. You'll never amount to anything without me, he had told her once in a fit of anger. I made you, Sophia. I'll break you if I want to. It had been those words that had pushed her out the door, the ones that had made her realize how little he had valued her, how little he had ever understood her. He had built an empire. But what had he built for her? A life of luxury, yes, but it had come at the cost of her own identity, her own dreams. I don't need you, Max, she thought, clenching her fists at her sides. I never did. But as she navigated the crowd, she couldn't help but notice the way people looked at her, the way their eyes flickered from the twins to her and then back again. She felt exposed, like a specimen under a microscope. The questions were there, lingering just beneath the surface. Why did she leave him? What was it like to be married to a man like Max Cross? She quickly turned her attention back to the twins. "Let's get you something to drink, okay?" she said, her voice light, trying to shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest. Marina smiled brightly. "Ooh, juice," she said, pointing toward a nearby table where a tray of colorful drinks was waiting. Sophia smiled, grateful for the distraction. She loved her children, more than anything in the world. They were her everything, the reason she kept going when life felt impossible. As the twins approached the drink station, Sophia paused for a moment, her eyes flitting across the room to where Max was standing with a group of colleagues. He was talking, his smile wide and charming, but his eyes were sharp, constantly scanning the room. It didn't take a genius to figure out that he was still watching her. "This is exactly what he wanted," she thought bitterly, "to make me feel small, to remind me of my place." And yet, as much as she wanted to react, to let him see how much he had hurt her, she wouldn't give him that satisfaction. She refused to be that woman again, the woman who crumbled in front of him. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "You've already won, Sophia," she reminded herself. "You've already won by walking away." Max stared at her across the room, his gaze narrowing as he watched her interact with the guests, a calm smile on her face, her posture perfect. The children were tugging at her sleeve, asking questions, and she responded with a gentleness that Max knew he could never hope to replicate. He had always been able to control situations, to make people bend to his will. But Sophia? She was different. She had never been like the others. Even now, as he watched her, he couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. What had he done? What had he lost? For a moment, a flicker of vulnerability crossed his features. He could see her clearly now, stronger, wiser, and far more capable than she had ever been when they were married. Max turned away, unable to look at her for another second. He couldn't let this weakness show. He couldn't let her see that her presence had affected him, that he was anything less than the dominant, untouchable man he had always been. He stepped to the side, grabbed a glass of champagne from a nearby tray, and downed it in one go. The bubbles burned the back of his throat, and he blinked, trying to shake off the unfamiliar discomfort. "She's fine. She's moved on," he told himself. "And so have I." Max is clearly struggling with something beneath the surface. Do you think he's starting to regret his past actions, or is he still trying to control the situation? Let us know what you think in the comments. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the ballroom, but for Max, the world seemed to have slowed to a crawl. He stood near the edge of the room, his back slightly turned, watching Sophia as she continued to interact with the guests. She had become the center of attention, her poise and confidence drawing eyes and whispers wherever she went. He hated how natural it all seemed, how easily she fit in. But he wasn't going to let her walk away with that silent victory. Not tonight. Max had invited her here for a reason, to remind her of what she had lost, to show her what she could never have again. But so far, he felt like he was the one who had lost the battle. Every smile she gave, every word she spoke, it was as if she had already moved on, far beyond the person she had once been when they were together. And that irritated him more than anything. As he brooded in silence, one of his colleagues, Evelyn Matthews, approached him with a soft smile. Evelyn was in her early 30s, a rising star in Cross Enterprises, and though Max had always been careful with his personal life at these events, there was a tension between them that had been brewing for months. She was the type of woman who saw the value in his power and status, and had made it clear that she was interested in more than just business. She noticed his distant look. "Max," she said, her voice smooth like velvet. "Everything okay? You've been awfully quiet tonight." Max turned to her, the flicker of frustration still in his eyes, but he forced a smile. "I'm fine, Evelyn. Just distracted." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, following his gaze toward Sophia. "Ah," she said knowingly, her lips curling into a smile. "Sophia Walker. How does it feel to see her looking so comfortable in your world?" Max's jaw tightened. "It's nothing," he muttered. "She's just playing her role." Evelyn glanced at him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "Doesn't seem like she's playing. She's just owning it." Max's gaze remained fixed on Sophia as she laughed with a group of investors, her smile so genuine it almost made his chest ache. He could feel his grip on the situation slipping, the control he prided himself on slipping through his fingers like sand. "She's nothing without me," he repeated silently to himself, but the words lacked conviction. Meanwhile, across the room, Sophia could feel the eyes on her, some curious, others pitying, but none of them with the warmth or understanding she craved. She didn't let it show. Though, she couldn't. The twins, happily sipping juice and nibbling on small hors d'oeuvres, were the only anchors keeping her grounded in this sea of superficiality. She hadn't come here for Max, for the gala, or the spotlight. She had come to prove something, to herself, to him, to the world. She wasn't the same woman who had once clung to his every word, searching for validation in his gaze. She was a mother, a woman who had built her life without needing anyone's permission. And yet, the familiar weight of Max's presence had a way of creeping up on her. Even from across the room, she could feel the heat of his stare, like an invisible force pulling at her, reminding her of the years she had spent in his shadow. She wasn't afraid, but the past, the memories, they were hard to ignore. But just as she was about to pull her attention back to the twins, something unexpected happened. One of the event coordinators, a frazzled woman named Rebecca, rushed up to her, a nervous smile on her face. "Sophia, I'm so sorry to bother you, but Mr. Cross has asked for you to join him for a brief conversation. He said it's about the company's upcoming charity project, and it's urgent," Rebecca stammered, clearly uncomfortable at the awkwardness of the request. Sophia's brow furrowed, her mind immediately jumping to the only reason Max would want to speak with her now. "It's a power move," she thought. "He's going to try to manipulate me, embarrass me, whatever it takes to get under my skin." But she wasn't about to let him have that satisfaction. "No more," she swore to herself. "Fine," she said, her tone cool, making sure Rebecca could hear the edge in her voice. "Lead the way." The walk across the ballroom felt like it took an eternity. Every step she took seemed heavier than the last, the eyes of the guests around her pressing down on her shoulders. But she refused to show any sign of hesitation. She kept her head high, her steps firm, even as her heart beat a little faster with every inch closer to Max. Rebecca led her to a quiet corner near the back of the room where Max was standing, alone. He had his back to her as she approached, but he knew she was coming. Sophia stopped a few feet away, arms crossed over her chest, her stance defiant. "What do you need, Max?" she asked, her voice flat but unwavering. Max turned to face her, his smile cool but strained. "Sophia, I didn't think you'd actually come over. I figured you'd avoid me the whole night." His tone was mocking, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something that didn't quite reach his confident mask. Sophia narrowed her eyes, her gaze flicking from his face to the empty chairs nearby. "Get to the point, Max." For a brief moment, Max hesitated. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if trying to piece something together. But whatever he saw didn't change his demeanor. His eyes were guarded, his voice smooth but with a sharp edge. I wanted to talk to you about something personal. A little closure. Sophia's eyebrows rose slightly, and she let out a soft, almost disbelieving laugh. Closure? Is that what you think this is? Max stepped forward, his posture shifting as if he was trying to take control of the situation. You think I've just been living my life without any regrets? Without considering the mistakes I made? His voice softened slightly, a strange vulnerability creeping into his words. Maybe I've realized that the way I treated you wasn't fair, and I want to understand why you left. Sophia's breath caught for just a moment, the walls she had so carefully built around herself cracking ever so slightly. She quickly straightened, determined not to show the turmoil stirring within her. Max, you don't get to just show up and ask for answers, she said, her voice rising. You don't get to just demand closure like it's something I owe you. She paused, her gaze flickering briefly to the twins, who were laughing and playing at the dessert table, oblivious to the storm unfolding. You had your chance, Max. You had your chance to choose me, and you didn't. Max flinched at her words, but he didn't back down. He couldn't. I know I didn't. But now I see you, really see you, and it's harder than I thought. I'm trying to fix things, Sophia. Sophia shook her head, the bitterness rising again, but this time with more clarity. No, Max, you're not fixing anything. You're trying to control the narrative, but the truth is, it's too late. You had your shot at me, and you blew it. Max opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at her for a moment, eyes flickering with something unreadable. Then he simply nodded, the mask of arrogance slowly falling back into place. I guess I can't change the past, he said, his voice low. But that doesn't mean I don't regret it. Sophia's gaze softened for a brief moment, but only for a second. Regret doesn't fix what you broke, Max. It never will. With that, she turned on her heel, walking away before he could say anything more. Max seems to be showing signs of regret. But is it too little? Too late? What do you think of their conversation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Sophia's heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she walked back toward the twins, who were now circling the dessert table, their eyes wide with excitement at the array of sweets in front of them. The tension in her chest had barely subsided, but she refused to let Max's words, those carefully chosen lines he had thrown her way, affect her. She had done enough soul-searching in her years since the divorce. Max's attempts at closure wouldn't change the fact that she had built a life without him. Still, his words lingered. Maybe I've realized that the way I treated you wasn't fair. She couldn't shake the bitter aftertaste of that one sentence. She had spent years convincing herself that she had done the right thing by leaving him. She had fought so hard to rebuild her life, to find peace again. But hearing him admit that he regretted how things ended made her wonder if she had been too quick to walk away. Was there still a chance for forgiveness? Or was she simply too broken to believe in that? The twins noticed her approach, their faces lighting up with joy as they each grabbed a cupcake. Mom, these are the best, Marina said, holding up the colorful frosting-laden treat as if it were a prize. Maxwell nodded eagerly, his mouth half full already. Sophia smiled, her heart swelling with love for them. I'm glad you like them, sweethearts. But remember, no sugar overload before dinner, she added playfully, even though she didn't really mind. The sight of them laughing and carefree made her heart light. As they continued to indulge in the treats, Sophia's gaze drifted once more to the center of the ballroom, where Max stood. Still in conversation with colleagues, but his eyes continually flicking toward her. It was subtle, but she noticed it. A silent recognition that, despite everything, he was still aware of her every move. Sophia closed her eyes briefly, trying to push the past out of her mind. But there was no escaping it. Not tonight. Back in the corner of the ballroom, Max had taken a seat at the bar, the empty glass in front of him now half filled again with another drink. His head felt heavy, the weight of the conversation with Sophia still pressing on his chest like a vice. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? She had pushed him into a corner, leaving him with no choice but to admit his mistakes. But even now, the look in her eyes, the way she had turned and walked away so easily, lingered in his thoughts. As the bartender refilled his glass, Max closed his eyes for a moment, trying to shut out the voices in his head. He had spent so much of his life chasing success, chasing wealth, that somewhere along the way he had lost sight of what really mattered. His phone buzzed on the bar, interrupting his thoughts. He glanced at the screen, expecting another business-related message, but the notification stopped him cold. Message from Olivia. Max sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Olivia was someone he'd met a few months after Sophia left him, a beautiful, confident woman with the right connections and an ego that matched his own. They had spent time together, casually at first, but it hadn't turned into anything serious. The truth was, Olivia was just another reminder of the emptiness in his life, but her message, right now, felt like the final straw. "Where are you? You know I've been waiting for you." The text read, punctuated by an overuse of emojis. It was meant to be playful, seductive even, but Max couldn't bring himself to respond. It wasn't Olivia. It wasn't anyone else. It was Sophia. She had been the one to challenge him, to make him question everything about his life, about the choices he'd made. His mind wandered back to the early days of their relationship, the first time he had really let someone close to him, the first time he had opened his heart to someone other than himself. Sophia sat at the kitchen table in their lavish home, watching as Max flipped through the latest round of business reports. They had been married for almost 5 years at that point, but the signs were already there. The cracks in the foundation of their relationship were growing wider. Max was on the phone again, his voice low but the edge of frustration clear. He was always working, always thinking about the next big deal, always thinking about himself. "Max," Sophia said quietly, breaking into his world of numbers and spreadsheets. "I need you. I need us. We can't keep living like this." He didn't look up. "I'm doing this for us, Sophia. You know that." His response was automatic, like he had said it 1,000 times before. She knew he didn't mean it. She had known for a long time. She had wanted him to hold her, to tell her that everything would be okay, that they would figure it out together. But it never came. Instead, his focus remained on his empire, on the validation he sought from the outside world. One night, she had broken. She couldn't do it anymore. The constant loneliness, the unspoken resentment between them, the feeling that she had become nothing more than a supporting character in his life. And so she left. No dramatic confrontation. Just an empty bed in the morning and a few words in a letter that she never even handed him. "I can't be here anymore. I'm sorry, but I'm done." Max leaned back in his chair, the memory of that night flooding his mind with guilt and regret. He hadn't even tried to stop her. He had assumed she would always be there, always waiting for him to come around. But she hadn't. And now she was here, in front of him, stronger than ever, with no intention of turning back. He took a long drink from his glass, the burn of the alcohol doing little to numb the ache in his chest. He had never admitted this to anyone, not even to himself. But he missed her. And more than that, he missed the life they had built together, the life that was now beyond his reach. Max closed his eyes, his thoughts spiraling as he thought back to the times when they had been happy, before the business, before the greed, the times when she had laughed with him, when they had shared simple moments in their home, when he had been the man who loved her and wanted to give her everything. The man he had been then was gone, replaced by a billionaire CEO who was constantly looking for the next conquest, the next deal, the next win. But that man had never felt like a victory. He had always been empty. Sophia, meanwhile, still stood across the room, her hands clasped tightly around her clutch as she tried to force herself not to look back at Max. But she couldn't help herself. There was something magnetic about him, even now. She could see him from a distance, sitting at the bar, his shoulders slumped slightly as if the weight of his own decisions had finally begun to sink in. He wasn't as untouchable as he liked to pretend. In that moment, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pity. Not for herself, but for him. Max had built an empire, but in doing so, he had left behind the very thing that could have made him whole. Her. And now? Now he had nothing. Not her. Not the love they had once shared. Not even the respect of the people around him. Sophia's hand tightened around the strap of her clutch, her resolve hardening. He's too far gone, she thought. He has no idea what he's lost. Max is reflecting on his past decisions, but is it too late for him to change? Do you think there's any hope for him? Or has he truly lost everything? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The evening had shifted. The glamorous facade of the gala, the sparkling chandeliers and flowing champagne, seemed a world apart from the moment that hung in the air between Max and Sophia. Their interactions, once sharp and cutting, had somehow softened, like two old friends who were finally acknowledging that their past wasn't so easily forgotten. Max sat at the bar, his glass now empty, but he didn't feel like filling it again. The room around him continued to buzz with conversation, laughter, the clinking of glasses, but he was lost in his own thoughts, unable to stop the pull of Sophia's presence from across the room. It had been years, but in that moment, he saw her clearly for the first time since their divorce. She wasn't just the wife he had lost. She wasn't just the woman who had left him. She was so much more. She had become this force, a mother who had raised two incredible children, a woman who had built her life and her identity from the wreckage of their marriage. Max had been right all along about one thing. She was strong. But what he hadn't seen, what he had refused to see, was that her strength didn't come from his wealth or his influence. It came from within her. Sophia felt his eyes on her again, but this time, she didn't turn away. She had spent the entire evening navigating the space between them, playing the part of a confident, composed woman, but underneath it all, she couldn't help but feel something she wasn't ready to name yet. She had built a life without him. She had moved on, but she wasn't blind. She saw how Max had been watching her. She saw the vulnerability flickering beneath his usual bravado. And for a brief moment, she felt something stirring inside her, a mixture of compassion and the faintest spark of old memories, ones she had long buried. Is it too late for him? She wondered. Or is he still the same man who made promises he could never keep? The twins, oblivious to the tension between their parents, had wandered off to explore the grand ballroom again, chasing each other in laughter. Sophia watched them for a moment, her heart swelling with the love only a mother could feel, before her gaze drifted back to Max. It wasn't easy facing him after all these years, but the truth was, Max had been more than just the man who had hurt her. He had been the man she had trusted, the man who had once been her everything. And even though they were no longer the people they had once been, she couldn't deny the pull that still lingered. Max couldn't resist any longer. The curiosity gnawing at him was too strong. He had to talk to her. He had to try, even if it was futile. Without thinking, he stood up from the bar, his legs carrying him across the room before he could second-guess himself. He passed by groups of people, his mind fixed on one thing: her. Sophia, feeling the shift in the air as he approached, looked up from the dessert table, her expression neutral, but her eyes locked onto his. She had noticed him walking toward her, his usual confident stride now tempered with something softer, more uncertain. When he reached her, neither of them spoke immediately. They simply stood there for a moment, both acknowledging the past and the present in silence. It was a strange kind of peace between them, a brief pause before the inevitable confrontation. The moment where everything would either fall apart again or finally break open to something new. "You're not hiding anymore," Max said, his voice low but genuine. There was no sarcasm, no sharp edge to his words. It was almost as if he was trying to understand her. Sophia met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words more than she expected. "I'm not hiding from anything, Max. Not anymore." He nodded slowly, as if absorbing the truth in her words. "I've been watching you all night. You've built a life, Sophia. A real life. Not just a life in the shadow of me like I always assumed." Sophia let out a soft, almost incredulous laugh. "You thought I was just waiting for you to come back? I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I've been living my life, Max. My real life, without you." There was no anger in her voice, no bitterness. It was just the truth, plain and simple. And in that moment, Max realized how deeply he had underestimated her. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping lower. I've made mistakes, Sophia. A lot of them. I see that now. I don't know how to fix it." His eyes searched hers, and for a brief moment he looked like a man lost in a sea of regret. Sophia's heart twisted at the rawness in his tone. She had never seen him like this, vulnerable, exposed in a way he had never allowed himself to be before. She knew him well enough to understand that this wasn't easy for him. Max had spent his whole life building walls, burying emotions in the name of success. Yet here he was, standing before her, without any of the armor that had once made him invincible. For a fleeting second, she wondered if she had been wrong to shut him out so completely. She wondered if perhaps there was a way forward if only they could both acknowledge the damage done and move beyond it. "Max," she said quietly, her voice softer than before, "you don't fix everything with money and power. It's not about that. It's about the choices you make, who you decide to be when no one is looking." Max didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at her, the weight of her words settling into his chest like an anchor. Then, after a moment, he nodded again, his lips pressing into a tight line. "I've been so focused on winning all this time," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've lost sight of what it really means to live." Sophia felt a small, aching tenderness at his confession. She had always known that Max was driven by something deeper than just ambition. He had been searching for meaning in his own way, but he had never been able to find it. Not until now. She placed a hand gently on his arm, the touch warm but steady. "It's not too late, Max. You can still change. But you have to want it." Max stared at her hand for a long moment, his breath catching in his throat. It was a simple gesture, nothing more than a reminder that, despite everything, he still had the ability to be touched, to be human. And for the first time in a long time, he believed it. He believed that maybe, just maybe, he could change. Not for her, not for anyone else, but for himself. The twins returned to her side just then, both of them excitedly talking about the different desserts they had tried, their energy infectious. Sophia smiled down at them, feeling the protective instinct of motherhood rush through her. She was, after all, doing this for them, and for herself. Max looked down at the children, a slight smile tugging at his lips. It wasn't a smile of arrogance or entitlement. It was a real smile, one that acknowledged his past mistakes and the new direction he wanted to take. "I should probably go check on my colleagues," Max said, standing straighter and wiping the last remnants of sadness from his eyes. He was no longer the man who had come to humiliate his ex-wife. He was simply a man, standing in front of the family he had lost, trying to figure out what to do next. Sophia nodded, but before he could turn away, she caught his gaze once more. "Max, I hope you find what you're looking for," she said quietly, sincerity in her voice. "Not for me. For you." Max paused, then offered her a brief but genuine smile. "I think I'm starting to." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind the shadows of the man he once was and stepping into the unknown future that lay ahead. Sophia's gesture of kindness towards Max shows that there may be a chance for change. Do you think Max is truly ready to change, or is he just trying to find solace in the past? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The night had shifted from its earlier glitz and glamour to a more subdued, reflective atmosphere. The lights were dimmer now, the crowd thinner, with most of the guests having begun to filter out as the event neared its end. Sophia stood near a small, quiet corner of the ballroom, watching her twins play with a group of other children by the large windows that overlooked the city below. The peace she had begun to feel was short-lived, however, as the events of the night began to catch up with her. She had spent so long convincing herself that she didn't need Max's approval, that she had moved on from the pain of their marriage, but tonight had cracked that armor. The unexpected tenderness in his voice, the vulnerability she'd seen in him. It had shaken something deep inside her. Could there really be a chance for them to reconnect? Her heart had softened, if only for a moment, when Max had spoken of change. She had almost believed him. Almost. But now, standing there, her thoughts were clouded by the feeling that she was on the brink of something far more complicated than she could handle. She had moved on, yes. But that didn't mean she could forget the scars he'd left behind. Max's presence was still a weight in the room, a palpable force. And it wasn't lost on her that even after all these years, his actions could still reach her, tugging at the edges of her resolve. Suddenly, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned, expecting to see one of the event staff or even her children, but it wasn't. It was Evelyn Matthews, the woman Max had been talking to earlier in the night. Sophia's brow furrowed. She didn't know why, but she immediately felt a sense of discomfort. There was something about the woman's air, something subtle, almost too polished, that made Sophia wary. "Evelyn," she said, her voice guarded. "What's going on?" Evelyn's smile was warm, almost too warm. "Oh, I just wanted to introduce myself properly. I've seen you around a lot, of course, but we've never had a chance to speak. I've heard so much about you from Max. It's always so interesting to hear about someone's journey, you know." Sophia stiffened. Max had told her things? The words echoed in her mind, but she didn't let them show. She forced a smile. "I'm sure he's shared plenty, though I don't know that there's much to say." Evelyn's smile didn't falter, but there was a faint glint in her eyes. "Oh, I think there's plenty to say. You were always his rock, weren't you? It's a shame things didn't work out between you two. Max always speaks so fondly of the times when you were together. It's clear there was a connection there. Something rare." Sophia's chest tightened. She could feel the subtle undercurrent of something more in Evelyn's words, and it made her skin crawl. Max's name hung in the air like a veil, but it wasn't just his name that Evelyn was throwing around. It was the way she said it, like she knew something Sophia didn't, or perhaps like she was trying to assert her place. "No," Sophia thought sharply. "This isn't happening." "Max and I have a complicated past," Sophia said carefully, forcing her voice to remain neutral. "It's a story that doesn't need to be retold." Evelyn's smile faltered for just a moment before she quickly recovered, leaning in slightly. Of course. But I must admit, I've heard so much about your strength over the years. It's inspiring, really. Her voice dropped to a soft, almost intimate tone. I don't think anyone realizes how much Max still cares about you. Sophia stiffened, her breath catching in her throat. She had heard that tone before, the one that was too casual, too loaded with implications. The words, cares about you, hovered in the air like an accusation, a reminder that Max had once belonged to her, a man who had been the center of her world. And now, apparently, Evelyn was trying to claim that spot. Sophia wasn't sure what she had expected tonight, but this wasn't it. This was the type of conversation she had hoped to avoid, the sort of subtle, passive-aggressive power play that came with being an ex-wife in a room full of people who knew nothing of the reality behind the headlines. Before she could respond, Evelyn continued, her voice dipped in false sweetness. You see, Max and I have gotten closer recently. In fact, it's funny how life works out, isn't it? People come and go, but sometimes the people who were meant to be are just meant to be. And I think you've made peace with your separation from him, haven't you? Sophia's stomach churned. She could feel the edges of her composure start to fray. This wasn't an innocent conversation about old times. Evelyn was baiting her, testing the waters in a way that felt too familiar, too cruel. I'm sure Max is a great partner to have in business, Evelyn, Sophia said, forcing out each word with controlled precision. But I've moved on. I suggest you do the same. Evelyn's smile dropped for just a moment, and in that moment Sophia saw it, the true intent behind the polite conversation. Evelyn wasn't here to be friendly. She was here to stake a claim, to subtly push at the boundaries that Sophia had carefully constructed over the years. Max had made his choice, and now this woman, this person who barely understood the depths of their shared history, was trying to rewrite the narrative. Of course, Evelyn replied with a tight smile, her voice dripping with the kind of false sweetness Sophia couldn't stand. I'm sure you're happy with your life. You have your children after all. Sophia's eyes flashed, the last thread of her patience snapping. Enough. Before she could say another word, a loud crash echoed across the ballroom. The guests froze, and a few heads turned, startled by the sudden interruption. Sophia spun around, her heart pounding as her eyes searched for the source of the noise. There, standing in the center of the room, was Max. His hands were shaking slightly as he looked at the broken glass at his feet, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. He looked disoriented, as though he'd just been hit with a heavy blow. The room had fallen silent, the energy shifting from playful curiosity to sudden concern. People were whispering, glancing at each other, but it was clear. Max had lost control. Sophia's heart skipped a beat, the tension in the air thickening like fog. She could see the weight of his regret, his failure, in the way he stood there trying to gather himself. But it wasn't the controlled, charismatic man he had been earlier. It was a broken version of the man who had once seemed untouchable. Without thinking, Sophia moved toward him, her heart suddenly racing, her instinct to help overpowering the anger and confusion she felt. Max, she called, her voice softer now, a quiet command that seemed to still the room. Are you all right? He didn't answer immediately. His gaze met hers, and for a moment, all the words they hadn't said to each other hung in the air. He was struggling with more than just the spilled drink at his feet. He was struggling with everything he had tried to bury, the guilt, the loss, the realization that everything he had built could never replace what he had lost. For the first time in a long time, Max was truly vulnerable. And in that moment, a shard of their shared past broke free. The connection between them, the one that had once been so easy, so natural, felt like it might just be within reach again. Max's breakdown seems to be a turning point. Do you think it's genuine, or is it just another attempt to regain control? How do you think Sophia will respond? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The silence in the room was suffocating, the kind that clung to your skin like a heavy fog. Max stood in the center of the ballroom, still staring at the broken glass at his feet, his hands trembling slightly. His eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, were now wide with something raw, something unfamiliar. Vulnerability. It was a side of him that very few had ever seen, let alone acknowledged. And as Sophia walked toward him, the sharp pang of old memories rushed through her chest. She had always known the mask he wore, the impenetrable armor of confidence and power. But standing there now, broken by the simplest of moments, she saw the man beneath all of that. He wasn't the same Max Cross who had once taken everything for granted. The walls he had spent a lifetime building were crumbling, piece by piece, as he stared at the glass shards scattered across the floor. Sophia stopped a few feet away, her gaze never leaving his. She could feel her heart beating faster, not out of fear, but because of the strange pull between them. After everything that had happened, after all the hurt and the years of distance, the person standing before her was still the man she had once loved. Had she really moved on? "Max," she said softly, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the stillness. "You need to breathe." He blinked as if her words were a lifeline, something that could anchor him back to reality. Slowly, he raised his eyes to meet hers, and there it was, the recognition. His chest rose and fell with a steadying breath, but the crack in his facade was still there, lingering. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with the weight of everything he had failed to say. His gaze darted between her and the wreckage on the floor. I didn't mean for this to happen. It's just..." His voice faltered and he couldn't finish his sentence. Sophia felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly replaced with something more grounded, something that told her she needed to hold her ground. He was here, broken, vulnerable, but she had been here before. She had given him everything once, and he had taken it all for granted. She couldn't fall into that trap again. "Max," she said, her voice gentle but unwavering, "I'm not here to fix you. You need to understand that." She took a step closer, her heart racing with the weight of the choice in front of her. "You've hurt me. You've hurt the people around you. And I've learned, in all these years, that you can't fix someone else. You can't change for anyone but yourself." Max's eyes closed for a moment, as if the truth she spoke cut deeper than anything else he had heard. When he spoke again, it was with a quiet desperation, as if he was afraid he would lose her forever. "I don't know how to fix it. I've been trying, but it's never enough." His voice cracked, a rawness there that Sophia couldn't ignore. "But I'm trying, Sophia. I'm trying to be someone better, not just for me, but for the people I've hurt. For you." The words hung between them, suspended in the air like a fragile thread. Sophia stood still, absorbing his confession, and for a long moment, she said nothing. She knew he was telling the truth. She knew he had changed. At least in this moment, he seemed to have. But change didn't erase the past. It didn't erase the years of bitterness, the hurt that had shaped her into the woman standing in front of him now. Change didn't make up for the coldness he had shown her, or the selfishness he had masked as ambition. So what now? Sophia looked at him, her heart torn between the past and the present, between the person she had once been and the woman she was now. She had built a life without him, a life that didn't rely on his approval or his validation. But that didn't mean she could forget the love that had once been so real, so powerful. "I've spent years convincing myself that I didn't need you," she said quietly. her voice trembling only slightly as the words left her lips. "I've built a life for myself and my children. I've learned to survive without you." Her eyes softened, but the steel in her tone remained. "But that doesn't mean I've forgotten you, Max. I haven't forgotten the man you were, the man I loved." Max's eyes filled with emotion, but Sophia held up a hand, silencing him before he could speak. "No, Max," she said firmly. "I can't go back. I can't pretend that everything is okay, because it's not. You hurt me, and you can't just erase that with an apology." She shook her head, her chest tight with the weight of her words. "I'm not asking you to fix everything. I'm asking you to understand that I can't be the woman I was before. I can't be the woman who waits for you to change." Max's face fell, and for the first time that night, she saw the full extent of his vulnerability. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. He stood there, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders like a heavy burden. Sophia let out a long, shaky breath, her heart aching in her chest as she forced herself to look at him one last time. The man she had once known, the man she had once loved, was standing in front of her now, unrecognizable in some ways, but still familiar. "Max, you have to choose," she said, her voice breaking just a little. "You have to choose what kind of man you want to be. I can't do that for you." Max stared at her, his gaze filled with a kind of sorrow that mirrored her own. She had said everything that needed to be said. The ball was in his court now. With a final lingering look, Max nodded, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I will," he whispered. "I'll choose." Sophia turned and walked away, her heart heavy but resolute. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She had made her choice. She would move forward, with or without him. The next morning, as the sun rose over the city skyline, Sophia stood at her window, looking out over the bustling streets below. Her life was still her own. She had made the choice to move on. But for the first time in years, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the future wasn't as set in stone as she had believed. She had given him the chance to change. The rest, as they say, was up to him. Sophia has made her decision, but Max's future is still uncertain. Do you think he'll be able to change for the better, or is it too late for him? How do you think Sophia's journey will unfold from here? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Days passed, and the city's pulse continued on, indifferent to the quiet storm that had brewed in the Cross Enterprises gala. For Sophia, life slowly returned to its steady rhythm. She spent her days working on her career, her nights with her children, Maxwell and Marina, and the world around her seemed to settle into something calm, something she had fought for. It was a peace she had earned. It was the life she had built for herself, and nothing was going to shatter it. Yet despite the routine, there was an undeniable shift. Her interactions with Max had lingered in the corners of her mind, and though she had told herself to move on, her heart still ached when she thought of the man he used to be, and the man he might become. It was late one evening when the sound of a knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was unusual for anyone to visit at this hour, and for a moment she hesitated before opening it. When she swung the door open, standing in front of her was Max, his silhouette cast against the streetlights outside. His face was weary, but there was a softness there now, a tenderness that she hadn't seen in years. He wasn't wearing a suit or the power persona he'd worn like armor at the gala. He was just Max, the man she once knew. "Can we talk?" His voice was quieter than she expected, like a man who had been carrying a weight he couldn't bear any longer. There was a gentleness in his tone, but something deeper, too, a plea for understanding. Sophia stood still for a moment, her breath caught in her throat. She could feel the old wounds reopening, but there was no anger in her anymore. There was no bitterness. There was just the past and the choices they had made. Her heart raced as she glanced at her children, still asleep in their rooms. She had promised herself that they wouldn't be affected by the shadows of her past, that they would never see the man who had broken their mother. But tonight felt different. There was something in Max's eyes, something genuine. Sophia stepped aside, holding the door open. "Come in," she said softly, her voice steady. Max walked in slowly, as if unsure of what to do, where to stand. It was clear that he wasn't just asking for a conversation. He was asking for forgiveness. They sat on the couch, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Max took a deep breath, his fingers trembling slightly. "I'm not here to make excuses," he began. "I know that's not enough anymore." His eyes met hers, and there was a deep sorrow in them, a sorrow that went beyond regret. It was a recognition of the person he had been and the person he was still trying to become. "I've spent my life trying to control everything, trying to fix things with power and money, but I never took the time to understand the most important things. You, our family, what really mattered," he continued. "I can't change the past, Sophia, but I'm trying to change the way I live. And I need you to know that I've never stopped caring about you, not for a single moment." Sophia sat back, her arms crossed, trying to keep the emotions in check. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to. But could she? Max paused, his voice becoming softer, more vulnerable. "I've been seeing a therapist. I'm working on understanding my mistakes, and I know this won't fix everything, but I need to say it. I'm sorry. For everything. For hurting you. For not being the man I should have been for you and the kids." There was a long silence. Sophia's thoughts whirled, her heart conflicting with the walls she had built. She had moved on. She had learned to stand on her own, to raise her children alone. But hearing him speak like this, so raw, so real, it was hard to ignore the part of her that still cared for him, the part that had loved him with everything she had. "You left me, Max," she said quietly, her voice steady but full of pain. "You left me to pick up the pieces of everything we had, and it hurt. It hurt so much." Her throat tightened, but she didn't break down. She had learned to control the tears, to let the emotions flow quietly, rather than let them overwhelm her. "But I've learned to live without you. I've learned to be strong on my own." Max nodded slowly, his face etched with regret. I know I hurt you. And that's something I have to live with every day." Sophia looked down at her hands, gathering the strength she needed to respond. Could she forgive him? Could she open her heart to the man who had caused her so much pain? The man who, despite his flaws, had once been her everything? She looked back up at him. "I've forgiven you, Max," she said, the words a quiet but definitive truth. "Not for you. For me. Because I needed to let go of the anger and the resentment." She paused, her voice shaking slightly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean I'm ready to let you back into my life. Not in the way you want me to." Max's face fell, the sadness in his eyes deepening, but he didn't argue. He knew the truth of what she said. She had healed, she had moved forward, and the life they had once shared could never be resurrected, not without tearing them both apart again. "I understand," he whispered. "I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight. And I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be a better person. For me. And for the people I've hurt." Sophia nodded, her heart a mix of sorrow and relief. "That's all I can ask for, Max. That's all anyone can ask for." Max stood up, his gaze lingering on her one last time. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. His journey wasn't hers to take anymore. His choices were his own. But Sophia knew that for the first time in a long while, they had both found some measure of peace. "I'll leave you to it," Max said quietly, walking toward the door. "Thank you for listening, Sophia. I hope you and the kids are happy." Sophia watched him walk away, her heart heavy but unburdened. He had taken the first step toward redemption, and that was enough for now. As Max disappeared into the night, Sophia closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, taking a deep breath. She had given him a chance to speak, a chance to show who he had become. Now, it was time for her to look forward. The next morning, the sun was brighter than it had been in years. Sophia stood by the window again, this time with the twins by her side. They were laughing, playfully fighting over a book, their innocence a quiet reminder of everything she had fought for. In this moment, she knew she had made the right choice. She didn't need Max to complete her. She was whole, just as she was. And as the day unfolded, she felt lighter. The past, though always a part of her, no longer defined her. She was free. Sophia and Max have both taken the first steps toward healing. Do you think they could ever find their way back to each other? Or is their relationship truly over? Let us know your thoughts on their journey in the comments below. I appreciate you watching this story to its end. But trust me, this is only the beginning. If you're ready for more stories like this, subscribe now to stay connected to this world. You won't want to miss what I have for you next.